Hello, this is Silas back for the series. I think it's going to be called Dishing on Dish, the series that we do where we have conversations about different food. Steven, say what's up and tell them a bit about this series.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is another video in our series about food, which we've started. This is going to be part two of our videos on DB Bistro Moderne. For those who know me well, they know this is one of my favorite restaurants in the city. Unfortunately closed right now, but should be opening up pretty soon as the city is gradually getting back to normal.
Yeah, so this is the second part, as you mentioned. In the first part, we went over a bunch of different dishes, and the way we do this, Stephen goes to different places, and he's a bit of a foodie, I guess you'd say, and he's also been involved in the food industry. He's actually a professional, or was, due to different issues of the pandemic and things like that. But he's still, I think, once in that environment, you're kind of in it. And he's a good friend of mine, and I personally enjoy food. I like cooking, and we just have conversations about different things and different interests. Sometimes things are more political, sometimes things are more philosophical, sometimes just everyday things. It's almost never sports, never sports ball. But now really enjoying these ones in food. So I have interest in this. He has interest in this, and he can give some different details about the way the food is made. I like his insight in how it's actually cooked and the history behind it. And sometimes we go into more of those. And in the first part of the series, we had a little more longer of a conversation. But as we're picking, not the series of this part, which is part two, we had a little more conversation about this particular restaurant. But that's just the format it goes into for these dishing on dish ones. So can you tell us a bit about DB Bistro?
Sure. So this is one of Danielle Boulud's restaurants. Danielle Boulud is a famous French chef, one of the top in the city. Danielle, his restaurant flagship, has 2 Michelin stars, considered by a lot of people to be one of the best. After that, he opened Cafe Boulud, and then this I want to say is the third restaurant, DB Bistro, opening in 2001. So this is sort of I like to describe this as sort of being between Danielle, but his more casual places. It's a bistro, but it's higher end. For example, they have the menu's a little more refined. They have some white tablecloth tables. It's an elevated bistro. It's not just your cheap get fries and steak frites, although they'll serve things like that. But there are more intricate, a little more developed items. But at the same time, it's still reasonably priced. It's not like Danielle where you're going to go and spend 300 minimum or whatever.
Uh, yeah, and so far the dishes have been really exciting. And with this series, it's part of the You Are What You Consume, which is a larger conversation that I think was some of the earliest videos we had in these conversations were about that. And that's just about the fact that you are what you consume physically. Like literally the food that you take in, the nutrition you take in is broken down by your body and builds what physically makes you who you are. And then on top of that, human beings consume more than just physical nurture nutrition. We consume ideas and thoughts and things like that. And then the food itself is also this, as you mentioned, is a French restaurant from Daniel Boulud. Daniel Boulud, no, I'm saying that name wrong. What was his name?
Well, the D is silent, but a lot of Americans say it. So, I mean, yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
so with these foods, when we start getting into the restaurants, not just the cuisine itself, but the people who make these things, they are also part in this food. And we go and talk about sometimes into what made the food. Like, how did the food come to be developed? What is the process in making this? Where do you get these ingredients from? Why is it in this sort of way? Sometimes you find out, oh, this was just something that was found as an accident. And then sometimes it's something that goes much deeper where somebody has calculated and thought, let's actually try and make this in a particular way. As Stephen had mentioned in one of the restaurants that he's looking forward to going to, I think he said there was someone who's doing steaks that are soaked in or marinated or something, aged or preserved somehow before they're cooked in cloth with whiskey or something like this. What are these techniques behind the foods that we eat? And you are what you consume and get to know more about what we consume, and then we can share these things. You can make some of these things, and that's just part of what we're enjoying and try to get out of the series and communicate with y'all out there. And thank you guys, girls, and everything else in between for sharing this time with us. Anything else you want to say?
Well, just to sort of add on to your example, the way I think about it too is there were a lot of things that probably started as accidents, but people developed and refined later. So, for example, with that whiskey example that you just brought up, someone may have spilled whiskey on steak or something and they figured out, oh, it's too strong, but we kind of like the flavor, so why don't we pull back a little bit, take the same concept? Or in a previous video I brought up how Again, obviously I wasn't there, but we wonder how was olive oil discovered? If somebody pressed olives and they found a residue and they thought, well, wait a minute, if we squeeze all these olives, we'll have a lot of this and we can cook with it or flavor with it. So I'd imagine a lot of things developed in that manner too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with these talks, maybe you can listen to what we're saying and try to develop your own recipes and try out some different things, or it maybe can inspire you to actually go out and try some of these restaurants. Because for me personally, my knowledge of being able to cook, the more I learn about it, the more I appreciate the people that are able to cook. And one of the primary deciding factors I have when I'm actually at a restaurant is I look at the recipes on the menu and I say, okay, which are the things that take the most effort or have the most exotic or different kind of ingredients that is most unlikely for me to actually try making at home? Because I know, like, if I'm going to pay someone to make something, I might as well pay them to make something that I can't make, that I probably won't make, or would take a lot of difficulty. And then from that, maybe I'll think, okay, next time I try, if I ever get around trying to make this, or if I find the time, I can incorporate some of the ideas. I don't normally get just the basic type of things. And I think Steven also, he has some go-tos that you'll see in this series. But in general, he does have a rather eclectic taste in trying different things here and there, which is exciting to talk about.
Sure. All right.
Okay. So as mentioned, we had a first part of this, and we got into the point where we were talking about the entrees, and we had started with a meal that, Steven, this was on your birthday, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he had gone with his mom and his dad and his brother, and we had discussed the two dishes that his mom and his dad got. And now we're going to start off with Steven's, and then we're going to go to his brothers and continue with this series.
Sure.
So if you're ready, Steven?
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to go with the first one, with Steven's dish, which was the famous burger with foie gras and red wine braised short ribs and truffle shavings optional. Which, did you get the truffle shavings?
No, I've actually not gotten the truffles yet. I mean, when I went this time, my family was paying for it, so of course I wasn't going to impose. And then when I've gone on my own in the past, my financial status wasn't as good. But this is one of the dishes that DB is known for. I think it's been on the menu since opening, since 2001, or at least pretty close to it. So you can tell by the pictures here, it's ground beef. They grind the beef in-house. And then there's red wine braised short ribs. I know DB is a big fan of braised meats in general, so the short rib, they pull that apart. And then what they do is they lay out the beef. They put a piece of foie gras in the middle, and then they sort of, I think they wrap the beef around that, and then you sear the meat on the outside. Then of course the inside will be however done. I tend to prefer my burgers more like rare, medium rare, so you can tell it's pretty red. Now, Danielle has a good philosophy behind his burger here. He talks about how a lot of burgers in the U.S. especially are so bland. It's like the meat is okay, but then the tomato tastes like nothing, lettuce tastes like nothing, bread tastes like nothing. You put ketchup or mayo to give it flavor. So we thought, I think of what a chef in school said to me, and he said the same thing. He goes, every part of the item should taste great on its own. So, for example, do focaccia bread. So you have Parmesan focaccia on the top. You have fresh tomato, but you also have some tomato jam, so there's a little more flavor. You have some frisee, that's the lettuce. So again, the whole thing on its own, especially eaten together, tastes really nice. It's a really big burger. It's funny. He says that people would get other dishes and get the burger to share. I was like, I don't know how you eat all this. I mean, I've come in, I've just gotten the burger. That's like all I can eat. It's typically served with fries or also pomme soufflés. So pomme soufflés, for those who don't know, they're similar to potato chips, but they sort of expand a little bit when they're fried. So that's the name soufflé, means to rise. So they're like potato chips, but they're a little thicker and they puff up a certain way in the fryer. Because you notice potato chips themselves do that to a degree, but these are fried twice. That's how they have that effect. And you can get truffles, as we say. It's optional. I haven't done it. I mean, maybe I'll go back. I have a little more money now, but there are different amounts you can get them. It's by the gram. I don't know the price off the top of my head. I think you could do black or white truffles. The black are like $500 to $600 a pound. White are $2,000 to $3,000 a pound, and white are only in season October to December. The black winter truffles are a little longer. Then you can get summer truffles, but the summer truffles taste like nothing. They're not really that good. All right. Any thoughts or comments?
Yeah, with me on truffles, I mentioned this at least the first time it comes up in every video. Like it's one of the few foods that I won't say allergic, but it just seems like it literally gives me a migraine when I smell the truffle smell. I don't mind the taste of it. I don't find the taste to be something like super fantastic, but it's very aromatic food if you've ever actually tried it. Even as simple, just the truffle infused olive oil, even that gives me a migraine just smelling it. So for me, truffles are not too big, but it is one of the most expensive things you can purchase for weight to actual price in the world. And it's an odd thing. I don't really get truffles. I don't really get
It's one of those. It's sort of like foie gras itself. It's love or hate. Like people are either like, oh, I have to have this. I could put it on everything, or they're like, ah, it doesn't appeal to me. But I think too, truffles to me are like foie gras in the sense that I think less is more. Like if I go out to eat, I would have like one course with foie gras. But I know that in France now, there are some restaurants where they put it in every other thing. And it just becomes too much. That's what some chefs in school told me. And same thing with truffles. Like I remember one place I worked, there was a point where they were putting truffle oil on like every other item. It's just too much because then everything just tastes like truffle oil. It's nice to have, for me, like one or two items just like that, and that's it. Because otherwise, you might as well just put a bottle of truffle oil at the table and just dump it on everything. You know, what's the point?
It doesn't play nice with other things. If you're going to put truffles on something, it's going to taste like truffles. Yeah. That's one of those kind of things where it's a very strong taste. And then something again, like you mentioned with foie gras, but foie gras itself is not an additive. It's an element in and of itself, but it has a very subdued taste to itself. So it has something where I don't think you'd want to add too much flavoring to foie gras to take away from what foie gras is. Despite you want to taste the despair and pain that bird went through as it being created. It's very condensed into that. But now back to the burger. Like, yes, that's the thing with burger. Average kind of things like hamburger. Some places. This is one of the things that is a bit frustrating about the United States of America. And places, if you listen to this, you probably live in a place that you have certain access to certain things, and definitely a lot more access to things than most people in human history have had, even currently. But in America, it's like you go to somebody's house and they'll have this amazing like kitchen, or they'll have access to all the supermarket with all this ingredients, or they'll have this great grill, just like things you can time things to just on the dot and do things in such particular ways. You can go and order really cheap sous vides, like really cheap things to really get good at cooking, and then people just make that they buy those those frozen patties, go out there with just a bland bun, just throw it on the grill, and then they get that bland bun, they just throw the ketchup on it, some yellow just French's mustard, and chop up some onions. If they even get to chopping up the onions, and they just put it there. Now it's still nutrition, you still eat it, but there's a difference in that. There's a difference in the quality and the taste of what you can actually intake. And one of the particular videos I have on my channel was talking about this, the different definitions of how you actually get to define certain things. If you've only had McDonald's burgers your whole life, or maybe a great burger, and that greatness is held by the position of burger, of great burger is held by that Big Mac, and it's not a lie to say that. It's not false. This is a subjective thing. But if you've had something like Five Guys, which is far superior to your McDonald's and your Burger King's type of burgers, then it's like, wow, that's much better. Now that is also a burger. Now, if you had a really nice homemade thing where you actually marinate the meat, you mince it yourself, you maybe put some spices in there, chop up some garlic into the actual patty itself. Then now you go in and you use some heirloom tomatoes, and you do it in different ways. You now like slow cook your mushrooms, some onions and things like that, caramelize them down, and then you put them on some bread, and you make some like maybe some fresh aioli, and you just maybe use like a baked like fresh. That already now just upgrades it. Now that's above your Five Guys type of thing. All these things are burgers, but your knowledge and awareness.
Sorry, you froze up for a sec.
Okay, I hope it's actually recorded some of that stuff.
Sure. So what I was gonna say is, like Danielle said, and I would say as well, is there's a lot you could do with the burger. I mean, it doesn't have to be bland like the one you and he described. I mean, you could do different types of bread. You could put different things in the meat. You could use different types of meat. Like if you look at our Minetta Tavern burger, you could use dry aged meat. There's more flavor. You could do different condiments. I mean, there's a lot of stuff you could do. It's just people are used to the bland, basic one. And like you say, it's not that they couldn't appreciate a more developed burger. It's just that's normal for them.
Yeah. So with this one, when did you first hear about it? Like, did it match your expectations when you maybe first saw it on the menu? And with the foie gras, which is one of your go-tos, did you enjoy foie gras in this kind of presented in this kind of way, which is atypical to how foie gras is normally served?
Yeah, well, yeah, because what I would say is there are certain dishes where you can get foie gras, like a seared slice of it, along with something else. This is not quite like that, but kind of similar. I think it works well together because you have the charred outside, but the beef itself is more medium rare, which I like. But then you bite into it, but then you get the short rib, which is richer, but you have the red wine, and then you get a little bit of the fattiness of the foie, which is some flavor. It's not a huge piece of foie though; it's like a very little piece in the middle. It's kind of nice. I mean, it's funny. Our friend Abraham complained. He tried the burger, he liked it, but it wasn't his favorite. He's like, this is kind of a gimmick or something. I was like, I mean, again, I'm a foie gras aficionado, so I guess for me it's different, but it is a little pricey. But I mean, again, the items used, but also the portion is big. I mean, it's a big burger. Like I say, I mean, I could eat that, fries, and like that's plenty of food for me. So yeah. I think, I mean, you spend like $30, but I mean, it's like that's going to be more than enough food. Sometimes I think I've even gotten that, and I've gotten dessert, but taken like half the burger home or something.
Yeah, it looks rather hefty. And again, like you said, with the different things in there, the frise, then the big chunk of tomato down there, probably some different kind of mouthfeels in there. And I think that's one thing that is put into consideration when you're talking about just the cuisine being elevated at different levels. Is it's a sensory experience as well, having these foods. And one last thing with burgers also, this different variant in the burgers, like different places you go to, like I read a lot of anime and manga and things like that. And in Japan, the hamburger, is just the minced meat into a patty. Like it's normally served, I think the typical way to serve it is actually a mincemeat patty with some gravy, some kind of stew on it, and like served like hot that way on a plate and use your fork and knife. So there's different ways around this. The whole idea that it has to have just the bun and the meat in the middle, that's not a typical thing. The key part is the patty itself, that center part of it. Otherwise, it's just a different form of sandwich. Like one of the things I definitely don't mind at all is doing the whole like wraps with lettuce and things like that to add different kind of taste and flavor on some of these things.
Yep.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's also a tomato jam on the burger. So the jam is also a bit heightened flavor. Like there's a fresh tomato, but also jam. So the jam, I'm trying to think of what's in there. I think it's like there's probably a little bit of sugar. There's probably a little bit of vinegar, some salt. So it really heightens the flavor. So like he says, it's not a bland hydroponically grown tomato. It's like biting into water. This actually has flavor. And then that goes with the beef too. The acidity, the fattiness, it all works together. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Cool. Sure.
Okay, yeah. So now we're going to go to the next one.
Sure.
Good. Okay, so the next one here is the chicken paillard, and this
paillard.
Is arugula. Paillard.
Yep.
The chicken paillard, which is arugula, haricots verts, and sauce diable.
Yep. All right, so this is what my brother got when we went for my birthday. So it's a leaner chicken dish. It's paillard is just meat that's been boneless, and it's usually filleted or butterflied. This one is butterflied. You can tell it's split through the middle. So sauce diable, of course, means devil. If you know Spanish, diablo is devil. It's pretty close. So it's made from wine, vinegar, shallots, and tarragon. So the idea is it's more aggressive ingredient. So vinegar, of course, acidity. Shallots, there's a little bit of the oniony flavor, but sweeter. And then the tarragon, the licorice flavored herb. So this was kind of a lighter dish. And then the salad on top, that's the arugula. There's some haricot vert, that's the French green beans. They're cut, the ends are cut off and they're blanched. And then there's some almonds as well. Kind of like a lighter dish. It's funny, my brother's got a big appetite, but I guess this dish appealed to him. So I tried a little bit. It was nice. This is a good dish. Like if it's really hot outside and you're not that hungry, it's nice because it's leaner meat, but there's still some acidity to give it character. There's a nice salad. Like this is, I think of growing up in my house without air conditioning as a kid, like, my appetite was gone. Like this is the kind of thing that would have appealed to me on a hot summer day. Like it's still substantial, but it's not, you're not going to feel stuff off of it.
Yeah, I don't know too much about the French cuisine, but for my time living in Italy, chicken was a very, very seldom used dish in actual Italian cuisine. There's a lot of lamb, there's a lot of pork, there's a lot of beef, there's a lot of seafoods and different kinds of things like that. But chicken, the typical thing you'd find, at least in the Roman area restaurants, would maybe just like just like a basic chicken lemon, where it's kind of like a braised or just a broiled kind of lemon and chicken. That was a typical thing you'd find, but not too many dishes. Yeah, they have the chicken Alfredo, which many people outside of Italy would associate with it, but that's not a common thing. Even the chicken parm is not as common. The chicken parmigiana seems to be more of a common thing in American Italian restaurants than I don't really even recall seeing it that much in Italian restaurants when I was in Italy. So it's one of the things where this is again just depending on the bird. I think for chickens, they were mostly probably predominantly used for eggs and from the eggs for the baking and the pastries and all the kinds of things like that, rather than being used as a primary content for the food. I mean, for eating. So maybe when it came to being eaten, maybe it was the peasants or the people tending them at the end of the cycle of the chickens being useful for eggs. That's when they'd have them, and it was probably just more of a typical fare. Whereas it was very valuable to have the eggs for varied reasons and things. That was a continual type of thing. They keep hatching more chickens. So I think that might have been part of why. I'm not quite sure why chicken is, in particular is not as common in I don't is it old world cuisine that would be called in this kind of sense. But at least
Yeah.
in Italy, I don't know. You probably know more about French cuisine. Are there many chicken dishes?
There are quite a few, sure. Like what I was gonna say is they actually have it at the restaurant. I haven't ordered it. I may in the future. I typically, as you can probably tell, prefer beef or pork to chicken, but they have something called breast chicken, which is available in springtime. The chicken, it's from it's a white chicken. It's fed a diet of milk, or now currently they use milk pellets in its diet. So apparently the texture they say is super moist. Like it's the kind of thing you don't even need sauce. You could put like a slight glaze on the outside, cut right into it. It's super moist, really good. It's only in season springtime. It has to be made in that region of France. It has to be that chicken fed that diet. But apparently, this restaurant, as well as a few others, get it. And I know Paul Bocuse, who is Danielle Boulud's mentor, he was a big fan of that, and he wrote about it in one of his books or writings that I saw.
Okay, I think it was in the previous one. Was it in this one where we talked about the chicken oysters as well? Was that this?
Yeah,
Was it the
yeah, that was
sure.
the escargot dish with the oysters. Yep.
Yeah, so I guess that's something with it. So yeah, with chicken, and part of the reason many things taste like chicken is because chicken in general is a rather I won't say bland, but it's not a strong taste, and it's something that
Neutral.
yeah, it's neutral, and it's definitely something that you need to build off of. This is one of the few foods that's common to like mock like white people cooking, where it's like boiled chicken or like what was that Lonely Island with like the boiled goose, like boiled goose. But even goose
Ugh.
and duck, when you get into those things, even those animals, even turkey, have a much stronger taste than chicken. Chicken in general is rather bland, especially now when you talk about the broilers and the things which are just factory, don't move around much. Those ones are different. But then now when you get to like the capons, which is the ones that are castrated, or the free range ones, those ones now, depending on their diet, you can add some different flavorings and things in that. Like in Kenya, one of the common things, they call it kienyeji chicken. And I don't know, I'm forgetting exactly what kienyeji means. I think kienyeji is kind of old style, or kienyeji is like, it's not, I won't say like uncivilized, it's more like rural, just rough, just average type of stuff. And when you get the kienyeji chicken, it's almost a different animal. Like people might not even recognize it. It's just very thin and stringy, and almost the entire animal is red meat. And it's a different beast when you have that whole like wild caught thing with just free ranging around versus the whole thing where you just you're fattening it up. Sometimes some hormones or some selection for the thing to grow up a lot faster and get bigger. So, yeah, there's differences in there, but yeah.
Well, I was going to also say we'll get into it, but there's going to be there's going to be at least one wild boar dish, and think of it like wild boar versus domestic pig. You taste them
Yeah.
side by side, you'll taste the difference for sure. Because you figure wild boar, they're more muscular, they're gamier. I mean, it still tastes like pork, but if you compare it side by side versus like a large white pig made into a pork chop, it's going to be very different the way it tastes.
Okay. Now, the sauce diable, is this how French food? I don't really recall French food having too many, like, when it comes to the hotness, the Scoville scale, there's not too many things that are really on the higher levels of it, right?
Right, because remember that a lot of those peppers and things, of course, come from South America or Africa, as I'm sure you're aware. So they would use things like there's vinegar. They do use some, you figure, because there's cayenne pepper, there's espelette pepper. They do use that a bit. I think, especially when France started colonizing countries, I think that's when those things started to come more into use. So classically, in hollandaise, people will put some cayenne pepper in that. There's espelette pepper I've seen as a garnish, things like that. But in general, it's like French food is not predominantly spicy. I mean, they have a little bit, but it's not what they're known for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about this dish?
No, it's good. Like I say, it's kind of funny. My brother, for those who don't know, he's a big kid. He's about 6'4". I remember he had this meal, and a few hours later, he went to Virgil's and got another meal. It's like, Jesus, kid can eat.
But you still enjoyed the meal. You found it.
Oh
You found
yeah,
it
he did. Yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. So
all
moving
right.
on to the next one.
Yep.
Now that's done right now with the last two dishes we did on the first part, and these first two dishes. That's the entire meal that you guys ordered on that day for your birthday. But there's going to be some desserts coming as
Yeah.
well towards the end of this recording. But now we're going to
Yep.
get to a few other entrees before we get into the desserts.
Yep.
Okay, so here we go with the crispy frog legs, crispy frog legs with saffron tomato bisque and a soft poached egg.
So just one little thing. This was actually an error on my part. This was actually an appetizer, but I was sort of fooling around with the order. Not a big deal though. This I had, I'm trying to think, it was spring of a few years ago. This was one of the most interesting dishes I've had in some time. So basically, you can probably tell here what they did was they took the meat off the frog legs, they shredded it, they made it all into like a croquette type thing, they reattached it to the bone and they fried it. And then the saffron tomato bisque, if you had tomato bisque, that's similar to a soup. It's cooked gently, you puree it, strain it out. There's saffron in there. That's how it took on the yellowish color. And then a soft poached egg. So if you poke the egg, the yolk is running, it runs everywhere. It's really interesting though. Like I say, man, it's probably one of the most unique things I had. And then there's some on top. There's some herbs here. I'm trying to think if those were. It was almost like herbs and oil. In Italy, there's something called a gremolata, which is herbs, oil, and citrus. It's kind of similar to that, but minus the citrus. It's not a mainstay, just something to give it a little more flavor. It was really good though. I mean, if they put it back on the menu, I'd order it again. But this was a while ago, and a few chefs have come and gone, so probably won't see it again, unfortunately.
Okay, so this was really just diced down frog meat, the frog
Yep.
leg meat.
Yep.
Okay, I don't think I've had frog legs before, but that's the only part of the frog that's normally served. Like,
Correct. Yeah, they've been compared to a cross between chicken and shrimp. I think that's well, actually, sorry, that's alligator. I guess chicken mostly. It has a slightly different element too, though. I've gotten them. I've gotten them breaded and fried directly. They're almost more like a tempura batter. I've eaten them like that. That's kind of comparable to fried chicken, but you can tell there's a different element there. But this again, they shredded the meat down and they reattached it, so the flavor and the texture was a bit different.
it's been kind of like meat lollipops of sorts. And then saffron was just one of the. Also, that's another one of the. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it was sort of more like a croquette, like the meatballs where you like break up the meat, you make it into a ball and fry it, bread it and fry it. It's kind of like that, but it's reattached to the bone. That's how I would describe it.
Is there like a lamb dish that's normally served kind of like this, with like lollipop type of look?
Yeah. Yeah, they're called lamb lollipops, or in Italy they're called scotadita, which means burnt fingers. The idea is that because the bones are exposed to the heat as well, so if you were to grab it, you'd burn your fingers. That's where the name comes from.
Huh. And then saffron again is one of those very expensive spices. Another strong taste. I mean, at least the expensive when it comes to spices, when you're paying a lot of money, you're probably paying for something rather strong. At least that's one of the few things where I can kind of make some sense of the cost of some of these things, and not just the cost, but if you look at saffron, it's actually I don't know what this technical part of the flour that it is, but it's these little stringy things in flowers that need to be like picked out normally by hand or like tweezers, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they just like each flower has maybe 10 of them and at most, and so it's just going through just hundreds of thousands of flowers and just being picked out, and it's from a very limited location. Earlier before this, we were talking about something related with Afghanistan and how like 93% of the world's like medicinal grade opium, which is heroin, comes from just Afghanistan. But this saffron itself still comes from a very limited location, and it's like 99% of the actual saffron that you buy is fake, but 99% of the real one comes from this like town. It's pretty ridiculous when you look into it. There was a documentary I might try to remember to link and about that.
Yeah, so it's the stamen of the flower, the inside part. It's kind of like working with tobacco or something here. Like it's a very tedious, brutal job. Like they say if you go to Spain, it's mostly people from North Africa who do this kind of work. Sort of like here, if you look at who picks tobacco, my dad actually did it for a time. I'm trying to think if he was like college age. He said it was mostly like Mexicans and Puerto Ricans because it's like a very tedious job that it's one of those like you need a paycheck, so you take that job. It's not something most people want to do.
Yeah.
And if you ever buy saffron, it comes in these tiny jars, maybe like 2 inches high, and there's like a little pouch inside with a few strands, and you throw like a few strands into each like dish, like basically.
Yeah, and it's I guess. Is the taste that strong, or is this more of a colorant type of thing? It just has that.
I get the taste. I mean, the thing is, like, if you put like a tiny bit in, you wouldn't taste it. I get a flavor profile from it. Like I know I actually had saffron ice cream at an Indian place that was pretty good. So The flavor does, like, if you were just to put, like, let's say yellow dye versus this, like, I would know the difference because there
Yes.
is an actual flavor. It's not super, it's not, I mean, it's not like truffles or something where it like knocks you over, but there is a flavor there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with the meat, yeah, that's interesting. This is something that I think I would want to try. It's probably more easy for people to try this before they hop the escargot, the snail type of thing. And you mentioned tastes like alligator. I've had crocodile, not had alligator yet. But I bet it's kind of the difference between maybe like pork and or like bison and wild. No, what's another wild kind of mustaday, whatever that family was. Maybe difference between like bison and elk or something like that might be the difference between
Yeah.
crocodile and alligator. But I think they're rather close in I expect the taste not to be too different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So anything else you want to say about the frog legs?
Not really. I mean, I've been looking for other frog leg preparations. I was just telling Silas before this started that there's this old school French place near me. They actually have frog legs cooked with absinthe. There's an old school recipe. I want to give that a shot, see what I think of it, just because it's a kind of thing you don't see too often anymore. And I think most people know about me. I like stuff that's a little off the beaten path.
Yeah, typically you're going to get them kind of served like chicken drumsticks, or it's just the entire, or like chicken wings might be more accurate since it's the both joints, right? They get up, they remove the foot, the flipper part, and it's
Yeah,
like getting the chicken thigh with a drumstick and the thigh together. That's the part that's more frequently served in that kind of way, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so next one.
Yep.
Okay, now we're on to organic chicken, which is lobster mushrooms, gnocchi parisienne, and huckleberry jam.
Sure. So this is an organic chicken breast. This was a springtime menu item. Again, I think this was, like I say, I typically get beef and pork, but this I wanted to try the chicken. It looked really good. So gnocchi parisienne, for those who don't know, I've had it in a few different places. It's pretty good. So gnocchi is typically potatoes and flour, although there are gnocchi preparations that are just straight flour. Maybe if we do Batello mild job, they had one that was just flour and ricotta cheese. It was really nice. These little white pillows. They were very nice, very light. It went with a bolognese sauce. So gnocchi parisienne, though, however, they're made from pâte à choux. Pâte à choux, for those who don't know, that's the dough you use for cream puffs, eclairs, and gougères. Gougères are basically just cream puffs, but they're savory and they're made with Gruyere cheese. So it's dough that's sort of cooked on the stove, piped out, and then baked. Or in this case, I think what they do is they cook it, they pipe it into they cut it into these pieces, and then they just saute it with butter on the stove. Really nice. Yeah. And then huckleberry jam, I think you can see a little bit on the plate. Lobster mushrooms, another, I want to say they're a springtime item. A little richer in flavor, bigger. They're usually reddish in color. You can't really see it too well here. Not a whole lot else to say. I mean, pretty good dish, fairly simple, but well done, of course.
Yeah, mushrooms, whenever you want to add mushrooms, is a positive thing in my estimate. Almost, almost. Of course, there's going to be times where it doesn't work, but
Yeah.
in general, it's a nice addition to it. And again, it's another thing. If you live in the States, you're going to have access to button mushrooms, but there's a wide range of mushrooms. If you like button mushrooms, try to get your hands. And again, there's lots of options to get things delivered. And mushrooms are something that can keep rather well even delivered. Sometimes you can get them dried. You can get the what's it called, get them back rehydrated and things like that. Like there's some typical traditional mushrooms that we eat from the Western Kenya, from the tribal lands my folks came from. I really like that dish where you normally get them dried, but then right now you get them back in, then you soak them in water to get the soil and things out of the hood and the rest of the roots. Sometimes, depending on how it's picked, it's not done as well. But then the water gets back in. You normally leave them overnight. Then you kind of shake them off. Then you normally just boil them for some time. And then once they're in that form, you can now use them in a myriad kind of ways in different stews and additions to meats, or just even just directly by themselves. It's a magnificent thing. So with the mushrooms, yeah, mushrooms have very many different flavors within just that mushroom family. I think it's kind of like, I mean, but it's the mushrooms or fungi is just kind of its own its own kind of life form in itself. Once I wanted to say it was like the cheeses of something, but I'm like, no, it's like cheese in that cheese is its own thing where there's a myriad of ways to have cheese. Mushrooms are also its own thing where it's a myriad of ways to have mushrooms and enjoy them.
Well, and remember too, they're classified differently, mushrooms versus other vegetables, because the way they reproduce through spores versus through seeds, and they grow in different ways. And there's colonies as opposed to seeds flying off, growing independent plants, and it's a very different organism the way it's structured. And I've always been fascinated with mushrooms. I know they talked about going mushroom hunting, but that's one of those things you either have a guidebook or have someone who knows what they're doing, because there are a lot
Yeah,
of there are a lot of mushrooms that are imposters, as they call them. Some are easy to tell, others not as much, but I wouldn't mess around, because I remember I had a friend who was into this a number of years ago, and he was saying how they're toxic, but some of the mushrooms you find in the woods are toxic, but in different varieties. Like some you'll eat, you'll just get sick. Others you eat, you won't make it out of the woods alive. Like that's how bad
yeah,
some of them are. Others you'll actually hallucinate and they'll poison you at the same time. So it's
yeah.
like you'll just collapse in the woods. So it's like bring someone who knows what they're doing, or have a guidebook or something. Like I say, some are easy to tell. Like I know, for example, with morel mushrooms, the real ones have these very big caps and tiny stems, but the fake ones look like asparagus, like tiny cap and big stem. So like there's little things like that that are easy to tell. But then with chanterelle mushrooms, the yellow ones, there's like 5 lookalikes. So you really got to be careful with that stuff.
Yeah, this is one of those things that make me just look into history like, wow, thank you ancestors, because how many humans died in the trial and error to try to find out what some of these foods were able, like how starving did you have to be to like, oh, I'm gonna try this random creepy red looking thing on the ground that I've never seen before, like, ah, I'm gonna eat that, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm safe.
Well, in morel mushrooms, I don't think I have any dishes in here off the top of my head, but I might in some others. But those are in season in springtime. I really like those a lot, but those are a porous mushroom. And the thing is, the way they're porous, though, the thing is dirt and sand gets trapped in the pores. So there's different ways to clean them. I know. I think it's at Gordon Ramsay's place, they actually take a hairdryer and just blow out all the dirt. I think at Danielle, they said they wash the morels like 20 times or something, because it's like all this dirt and stuff. Well, all this dirt and stuff gets inside, and if you're paying like that amount of money, they better be perfect. It's a pain, but it's like that's the standard.
What's that? I'm looking at the picture of it. What's that thing? There's like a phobia, or there's a thing. I'm trying to look at the name for the thing where it's like where you when you look at something that has like oddly shaped holes and things like that, and different in non-geometrically positions, it gives off this kind of icky feeling. Like,
Uh,
you know what I'm talking about?
I know. I think I know what you're saying, but I don't know what
Yeah,
it's called.
there's some actual thing that's a name for that thing, where if you look at something that you superimpose an image of just odd different holes and things like that in just oddly irregular positioned holes, it just gives you a negative feeling. I don't know, like a beehive wouldn't do it because it's shaped as a geometry term, but the morel mushrooms definitely, some of them give off that kind of like, yeah, never give
They're
you
really good. They're really good though. We used to pick them around CIA in the woods. There were spots you could go, but they always try to keep them hidden, because it's one of those like once people know where they are, everyone goes there, and they're very sought after mushrooms. There's also a way to pick them where they say you're not supposed to pull it off, but you're supposed to cut it off with a knife, because apparently if you pull it off, it can damage the colony, and then they won't grow back the next year. So there's
yeah.
things like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, some of these things are rather hard to cultivate. Like in Kenya, we started to cultivate some things. Okay, the oyster mushrooms are one of them, the button mushrooms. But when you come to something like these, some of them it's wild, or they haven't really discovered ways to cultivate these in a more artificial, like human controlled kind of agriculture type of environment. It's more like you find where they grow, and then you, as Stephen mentioned, you limit off that area. Like one of the main dishes that we have with the mushrooms that I'd mentioned before were thisua, which is these termites, which is just the typical termites that you see in those big. Some certain pictures of the African savannah, I think that showed like the what's it called, the meerkat manor or something. You'd see them where you had those massive anthills that are like 10 feet high and things like that. The termite hills, those ones, those termites are only caught during the rain times, and then they're dried and then they're normally stewed together with the mushrooms. But we haven't got to the point yet where we're having like termite farms to have that to go along with the mushrooms. And also the mushrooms, it's still typically just like picked by people in the traditional places that they're from, and then now there's more of a delivery system where here in Nairobi you can order and have some people pick it from there and then ship it here in bus or things like that. But things are being advanced, and maybe the eventual future, before we have the replicators, we're going to have some ways to more cultivate some of these things and increase the taste, increase the ability for people to taste these. Okay, now with the chicken, it was organic chicken, so that's probably more like close to the kienyeji type of thing that I'd mentioned before, where you'll have a leaner type of meat.
Mhm.
Or was the chicken marinated in anything, or it's just the chicken? Because
No,
in
no, it's
my
just the breast
estimation,
here. the breast here, you can tell the crispy skin, and it's just sort of cut like through and then laid on the plate like side by side, the two pieces. Just presentation thing.
In my estimation, the kienyeji is more flavorful, but it's a musky type of type of taste. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you have to say?
Well, I was just gonna say to add on to your point about mushrooms, that's like they've talked about growing truffles in the U.S. as well as China. Now, in the U.S., apparently they've grown them, but they have no flavor, so they're trying to figure out what goes into that. If it's the type of soil, if it's like it's almost like a fossil fuel thing, like what's been residing there that impacts its development and all that. And the ones in China are terrible. I remember like some purveyors would try to sneak them in. They smell like petroleum because of all the pollution and stuff. So they would always make a point when the people would buy truffles, they would like smell each one, because if you get one like that, it's Chinese, it's bad, you can't serve that. But that's the thing. Some purveyors try to get sneaky, or sometimes I think even they don't know. Ones just get mixed in. So.
Yeah, and this is some good more knowledge. I mean, Stephen could have known this, but he's also been involved in the food industry and the procurement of different things, different ingredients, and things like that. But that's why in Italy, in Europe, they have these protectionist type of things of certain things. And we'd mentioned I think it might have been this one or the last recording we had talking about the blue cheese or the Roquefort, how there was particular caves that was found in to actually activate the cheese. And then some of those. Okay, so I don't know if this is recorded or not. Sometimes when it's freezing, where I'm just not recording, we're having some issues with the connection, so there's some freezing things, and try to note that down. But as I've been mentioning, there's protectionist things in Italy, in Europe in general, where they say, okay, certain foods can only come from certain places. But I think in situations with like the Roquefort cheese, where it was discovered in a certain place, but we've been able to identify what actual thing makes that cheese, makes blue cheese, and we've been able to duplicate that in other place. It's still Roquefort cheese in and of itself from that location is still unique in and of itself. So if we have a sort of thing where, you can actually understand it, I think making simulacrums, maybe not simulacrums, but at least getting to the point where we do the same thing in different places, I think to me that's positive, because that spreads the taste and knowledge of this, and people will still be able to eventually get that original Roquefort out, versus trying to do things where you're protecting things that can be made other places. When it comes to the truffles, those just literally, for what we know now, cannot be made in other places as good as they are from the locations. That's primarily in the European countries. Is it primarily Western Europe in particular? Which countries are it in particular?
Sorry, which item was it?
Which countries in particular do the truffles in majority come from? It's Western European, right?
Yeah, so mostly Italy. The white truffles come from Alba, Italy, in the north, Piemonte. And then in France, there's Perigord truffles. Those are black. Those are more in the south, I want to say. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I think there are some white truffles from Albania or one of the Balkans countries, but they're not as well known. So I think they're starting to find them in other places, just like, okay, most of the oil's in the Middle East, Venezuela, elsewhere, but you could get oil elsewhere too. It's just you're going to find a lot less of it, and those countries aren't as known for it. Yeah. And I was going to...
Old gods.
Yeah. Well, I was going to mention too, like, for example, with black trumpet mushrooms, we're talking about recreating the environment. Those grow at the foot of pine trees. So they're wondering if there's something with that about, like, there's certain nutrients that the pine trees take in. There's a certain climate. There's something like that. And somehow that environment is conducive to that kind of mushroom growing. And it was funny because I was talking to one of my friends, and she didn't like mushrooms, but the only ones she's had are like white button and cremini. I was like, you've had the most boring ones. Yeah. And I was saying to her, there's a lot of flavors and other types. Now they are pricier, I realize that, but that goes to your point about if we can expand more of this stuff. I mean, wouldn't it be cool to have the average household be able to get morels, black trumpets, all this stuff like fairly cheap, and you could have them with every dinner if you wanted? I think that would be great, personally.
Yeah, and you have to realize that it might sound so absurd and things like that, but okay, now pineapples might not be exactly the same, since pineapples can grow in many places, although there's this hectares of pineapple farms in the hills, I think around, I don't know, Kentucky, saying, Kiambu, not Kiambu, but here in Kenya, there's a place where it's like Del Monte just has mountains, like hills and hills and hills of pineapples. And pineapples, I think even as recent as Victorian times and maybe sometime after that, it used to be like a mantelpiece where you'd put it up. It's like a status symbol. You wouldn't actually get it to eat it. You would just rot, actually. It was like in royal houses would have it. Oh, I can get a pineapple. And now it's just canned pineapples here, upside down turnover cake here, like just pineapples and fruit salad itself was such an uncommon thing to have that many fruits together that you could just chop them up and just not enjoy the fruit for the fruit, but just mix them up and just have this kind of mix together, like a fruit salad in that kind of sense. That's something uncommon. And I think soon we'll get to the point where some of these tastes will be able to be expanded. And as mentioned before, you can order some of these things. You don't have to go out and pick it for yourself. You don't have to go out and get your. They used to use pigs, I think, to kind of get the truffles, but then the pigs would eat the truffles, so they switched to dogs. But you don't have to have your special like bloodhound truffle sniffing dog and go to the Piemonte region in Italy to get them. No, you can still get access to these things. So I think do yourself a favor and expand your horizons by just maybe saving up a little bit here and just trying to get access to some of these things in some certain way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that about pineapple because like pineapple upside down cake was one of the first things I learned to make as a kid. Like I remember in Boy Scouts, it was one of those things we made on camping trips because I guess there was a way to make it where you could mix up the batter and then just like cook it by the campfire, then you just cut into it and ate it. So it's funny you guys were saying like that at one point was like a prestigious thing. Now it's like, you know, American kids can learn how to cook with it at a young age. And then the other thing I was going to mention, I want to go to it at some point, but there's actually a truffle store by me. I think it's Urbani Truffle. It's been closed at the moment with the pandemic. I don't know if they'll open soon because it looks like they're not permanently shut. They're just shut for now. But they have a lot of truffle products there, like different creams, oils, things like that. When that opens again, I want to check that out. It's kind of near me in Hell's Kitchen. It's a little more westward, closer to the water, but it's not like that far to walk.
Yeah, let us know when you do that. We can do like more of a short one if you try out some things for that.
Sure.
Okay, so next one.
Yep.
Okay, we have coq au vin.
Yep. So this is a very old school dish. The name coq actually means cock in French, like rooster. And the way this came about originally was they used a rooster that was older and like because of that the flavor was starting to change. So they would actually braise it in red wine to sort of dull the flavor a bit so it was still usable. Now, of course, we don't do that today because the quality of chicken's a lot better. But it's chicken leg. This is what they do. I mean, you could do other parts of the chicken too. But it's braised in a red wine reduction. You sear the meat first and you pour the other stuff in. And then you do is you cook the chicken in that, you pull the chicken out, you reduce it down. When you pick it up, there's some pearl onions. I want to say they're caramelized. There's bacon, which just gets sauteed, mushrooms that get sauteed. That liquid you cook the chicken in, that gets reduced down and strained, and then it's served as a sauce, which you heat up the dish. And it's an old school dish. I mean, I know Bar Balut had it, DB Bistro has it. It's nice. It's a good standby. It's a good richer kind of cold weather, colder rainy day. It's kind of a nice dish to have. And there's this one was also served with spätzle, which they serve as a side, but I didn't put it in the picture here.
What is that?
That's the dumplings. Those were in the escargot dish. If you're familiar, the German dumplings. People have compared them to corn pops. Basically, it's you press dough through a perforated pan and it falls into the water, and then the water cooks it, and you pull those out. Now, typically in Germany and Austria, they cook it like pasta, but in the U.S. they actually saute it, and they will even brown it a little bit with butter. I prefer it that way. I know Germans and Austrians sort of scoff at that, but it's a nice dish.
I thought this was America. It's America. Do what we want.
Well, my old Austrian boss was like, we basically see this as spaghetti, and you don't saute spaghetti. That was his justification. He
definitely hasn't been to fairs in the South, has he? Okay, so this is one of the meals that I think would be a common thing that you'd find at many French restaurants before you find some of these ones that are more like the frog legs that we had before above here. You probably won't find that. Like you said, a specific chef that was making it that place. But you will find this coq au vin at almost any French restaurant that has a decent menu. It's one of the staples.
Yeah, you can look on a lot of menus of French restaurants in the city. You'll probably find it in most places. That's one of those things. Maybe at some point I'll compare them restaurant to restaurant, see how they are. But I think it's one of those dishes that I think, because it's fairly simple, it's not going to vary that much. Like, I know if it's done properly, the meat will fall off the bone. I know you can mix up the wine a little bit. Typically, you're not going to use nice wine for this, though, because, I mean, this is kind of a peasant dish that it's a way to enhance the flavor of chicken thighs. And, you're not going to put $100 bottle of wine into this or something, so I don't think you would notice it that much. I was just reading too about wine pairings for this. They typically recommend Burgundy. That's where Pinot Noir is famously from. And you can do other wines too, different French wines from the south. Red wines that are a little milder because we can do something else on wine at some point, but like Cabernet Sauvignon, you would do that with a steak or something because a French Cabernet would be more aggressive. Like you'd get leather, black pepper, stuff like that. But then some of these lighter reds, like they're stronger, but they're not quite that aggressive. But because the chicken thighs are fattier than the breast, the flavor works well together.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, this again. Sometimes we might start working this more into this series as it matures, and we figure out a way to work with these. Like the difficulty of making dishes. I think this is a dish that the actual ingredients are not that difficult to get. Maybe the spätzle is going to be harder to make on your own, but everything else in the coq au vin.
I was going to say spätzle is not even that hard to make. I mean, you mix up the dough, you can get a perforated pan. You can also get spätzle makers. I actually had one at home. So it's this perforated pan and like a little hopper, and you would put dough into the hopper and just run it side by side, and then it would just drop into the pot. And then as the water would cook the dough that you dropped in, you would just pull those out with a spider and then cool them down.
Here we're getting into some social commentary here, and as I mentioned earlier, there's just like the access to the spätzle machine. Like for me, sometimes with some of the things, I just don't really have access to certain things. Like I want to make like a simple thing like to make is the hash browns. So like the best way to do hash browns, of course, you get whether you want to peel the potatoes or not. I don't normally peel the potatoes, but you grate the potatoes down, and then you dump them in like an ice bath or just like ice cold water. And then you're supposed to strain them to get them as dry as possible. Now, there's different ways you can put them on some what's it called, on some cloth or something like that. Just let them dry out over time. But there's particular squeezers that can just squeeze out potatoes. It's a rather common thing. It's a rather simple thing that you have access to in certain places, but I just don't have access to it. I guess you could make one. You can. I find different ways to figure out how to do it.
But well, spätzle you can. Spätzle, you could even just do a perforated pan. You don't need the spätzle maker. Like, just take a pan with holes, and you just got to press it through with your hand, and then just pull out the pieces that fall into the water. Because spätzle in a Swabian dialect of German just means little sparrow, because originally it's this rustic pasta. Like, it just pieces pushed through holes in a pan, so they fall into the water, and the water cooks it, and that's when you pull it out. Then you heat it up again when you serve it. It's not like some of the Italian pastas where there's either a machine or if it's hand cut, they have to be super precise. Like those are more, I mean, Italian food in general is kind of rustic, but it's a little more refined. Spätzle is supposed to be like a very peasant kind of dish. I mean, you could do like higher end versions of it, but it's one of those dishes. It's not meant to be super fancy.
Yeah, no, but what I was getting at was that you can get that. You can get the thing, and it's not difficult to get. And there's a myriad of other things you can get that are a lot more advanced to actually help you and cook certain things. And there's been a shift in Western society of, like you said, this was a peasant meal. So this was a meal being made by people who were working in the farms, were working hand and foot, physical manual labor for majority of the day, 24/7, and they still found the time to make these foods just out of need, and they were healthier in general, physically healthier. They had other diseases and things like that you have medicinal aspects and help for in modern society in current year. But in the past, they had time for this. But this move, now you're moving to a situation where most parents don't have the time, or they can't make the time, or they say, oh, we have to work with these things. You have a situation where there's inflation and other things like that, or people are like, oh, we have to have 2 jobs so we can live in this neighborhood. And when it comes down to the end of the day, having the 2 cars, paying for childcare, paying for like extra kind of activities for your children to do while you're at work and things like this, when it comes down to that point, that second salary, one of the salaries of the parents in a 2-parent household in this kind of situation, gets down to the point where the actual money they're making after paying for insurance and all these type of other things, this time away and things like that, they might only be making $100 a month. They might be being paid, like the salary for whatever job they're doing might actually get up to a few $1,000s a month. But when you count all those things in there, it's $100, if not taking money away. And then now you add the things that you're missing, just having the little time to be able to just make a meal like this, where you're saving on the money on having all this ordered food and things like that in that kind of situation. You better quality of food. You're building different bonds and knowledge. Your children know more about the food. They can participate in the cooking of this. You're spending time with the family. Just there's certain things that to me are just, maybe I'm saying this from a privileged position, from having both my parents being professionals and still my mom finding the time to cook and teach me. And that's part of why I really like food in that kind of sense. And maybe just looking like that's something that I value, but I see a lot of people not having the value in it when just getting the knowledge, getting the time to make these healthier foods and things like that, just better forms instead of just going out there and just getting. Sometimes the pasta you'll buy has been processed in a different kind of way. Get your own pasta maker, get your own flour, and it's like 2 ingredients, and then you can make your own pasta. You don't have to make that pasta every single day, but you can have like one day a month, make a whole bunch of pasta with your kids and things like that, then preserve it, and then for the next month or two, you have all this pasta to make. There's just there's just better ways than just you are what you consume. You might as well also be the one making what you consume, like as much as possible. And there's so many ways you can do some of these things. Just a little bit of effort, and I think it'll be more rewarding for majority of the people who do it. I've found very few people who have actually learned how to cook and been upset that they learned. There's many other things where people are like, okay, yeah, I'm going to learn how to sculpt. That's cool, but then what am I going to do with the sculpting? Oh, you're going to learn how to oil paint. Yeah, that's cool, but what am I going to do with this oil paintings? Like, am I really going to start selling these? But if you learn how to cook, you can use that every single day of your life. And to me, that's something worth putting your time into.
And to your point about preparations, like there are things you can do a lot of at once and just save them. Like you can form pasta and you can put it in the freezer and use the rest later. You can bake a bunch of loaves of bread and freeze some of it. In fact, some places, some chefs will encourage you to do that. Like, oh, if you don't want to use them all, freeze them right away and then pull them out when you need them, heat them up in the oven. They're just as good. Now, I mean, I'm not saying make like 6 months worth and have like a freezer full of bread, but I mean, if you wanted to do like 3-4 loaves of brioche, eat one in the next few days and save the others, like why not? I mean, it's the same recipe, just expand it.
Yeah. And it's I think it's a mix of that whole, we have to be out there like working and get this money and keep up with the Joneses. And the other aspect of also this, we have to have three meals a day. So it's like, oh, I don't have the time to make 3 meals a day. You don't have to have 3 meals a day. With some of these things, when you're making them in that hearty sense, like it's the content, the substance of the food is actually more substantial than some of the preservatives. When they break down the foods and they have to enrich and fortify those foods again, it's just not as filling. Like you can have fewer meals. It's just get into it. If you can find a way, just find a way. Even if it's a microwave, there's microwave cookbooks out there. You don't have to have a full-on kitchen. Just try to up your game into it. I think you'll appreciate actually doing it.
Well, to sort of add on to your point, I remember talking to people about this in culinary school too, where, I remember we'd make fun of Rachel Ray a lot. Now, in fairness, Rachel Ray was more for housewives, not professional chefs. But one of the points a friend of mine made was like, people would always say things like, I don't have time to learn how to cook. He's like, well, it's like exercise. It's not that you don't have time. It's that you don't make time. It's like you can spend hours binge watching Netflix, hanging out at the bar, whatever. Even if you set aside like a half an hour or something just to do this one thing, you would get a lot more out of it and it would be better. Like even if you spent like an extra hour in the kitchen, or I was thinking even when I stayed with my family, like I would remember when I was making brioche dough, like it has to rest. So I'd make it like late at night. I'm up late at night anyway. Why not make the dough, let it rest, proof it, mix it, work it a bit, let it rest, put it in the fridge next day, let it proof again, bake it. Or even some of the stuff, like let's say I was making chowder or like a braised item, do the mise en place, that's everything in place, cut up the vegetables, I'm up late anyway, put them aside, next day just throw it together. Things like you can find ways to manage time so it's more efficient, then that stuff is just there and you can throw it together and it's not, okay, I have to spend 2 hours doing this or whatever. No.
Yeah. And I think it's also another thing to do with some of the urban areas with breakdowns of community. Even in urban areas, I was just thinking of doing an app where you do like the Chef With app type of thing, where you have, you live in a certain on a block, and then you just knock. Okay, I live in this block today. This week I feel like making lasagna, and instead of just making it for yourself, because the effort that would take to make a single lasagna, I guess you can freeze it and have it for some time. But to me, lasagna is a dish that's better made like for family, like family size, like a massive thing. So, and I don't mind it fresh, but I mean I prefer it fresh, but I know it's still good when you keep. But just that's an example of something. You put that in the app, and then somebody else, maybe your apartment building or the block next door, says, oh, I'm going to make some bread. And when you make the dough for the bread, to make dough for one loaf is the same process and energy pretty much that you'd make to make 20 loaves. Yeah. So that person says, okay, I'm going to make a bunch of them. You're making some lasagna. Let's meet up together, and then we do like a little exchange of food. And I think that might be part of what the breakdown is with some urban areas, is people don't have that communal type of sense. Yes, they might also have places where they don't have the kitchens or things like that, or just the know-how. Someone might know one thing, somebody else knows another thing. And even back in the day when you had these villages, it's not like every home would make something. There was more of a communal thing where, once you have your meal of this, you would share with the people, you'd go around to visit people. There was some kind of sharing of that. And I think that's something that could come back, and maybe it still exists in the rural areas and not so much in the urban areas. But it can be done in the urban areas if you already have these food services that deliver you all the ingredients and all you got to do is cook them. I think even that is a step up from just ordering the food already made. So there's steps and things being done that I think the future looks good for people who are interested in food, and I think everybody should be interested in food.
Well, to add on to your lasagna example, what you could even do is make like a big pan of it, freeze the whole thing. When you want to eat it, cut out a section of it, bake that one part off, eat that part. Or you could do lots of little pans and just freeze them, like layer them in your freezer or something, and just throw that one pan into the oven. You can feed your family. And then down the road, if you want another one, do that. Don't do like what I had growing up before we had the microwave, where they kept reheating the same thing. You know, it dries out. It's horrible. But I'm saying you could batch it out, I think, in a way. So it's done. You just throw it into the oven and then you have it, you eat what's there. That's it. And then next time pull out the other one. So it's practically fresh. It's not, you're not going to make it from the ground up each time, but if you make it, you freeze it, eat it like in the near future, it's good.
Yeah. That to me, that is one of the things that seems to be one of the jobs that's dropped the most, the homemaker type of thing.
Yeah.
And that used to be the calculations and the mostly the moms in this kind of situation would make those calculations. But hey, if it's a single dad, it's a single mom. In the past, you still have to make those calculations. But that's a valued thing, by knowing that, by being confident that you don't have to worry about going home and making a full meal because one of the partners in the relationship is there. You're sharing the burden in this kind of sense. You can put full on work, like full on hours in work, and then when you come home, you're just like, oh, you pooped. You don't have the energy. But someone will also be at home doing that. And then that person doesn't have to worry about going out and making sure they can earn enough currency because you're not paying the water bill with a lasagna, but you can feed the kids with the lasagna and things like that. So it's just something that I find to be typical about certain places in the United States of America that I don't think should be to have a country with this much access to resources and have that many people to be malnutritioned. To have this many people to be in a situation where obesity is an epidemic, that's just lack of knowledge and relationship with actual nutrition, what you consume and things like that. Yes, it's related with, in many cases, different adverse childhoods. It's unnecessary. Many issues that I see, having lived in developing countries and then in the developed world, however you want to call first world, third world, is first world countries. In developing countries, the issue is there's no infrastructure, there's no knowledge. It's more ignorance, inability to do certain things, no time to do certain things. But most of the issues I see in the developed countries is just a failure of the systems, of the people to just put in a little more effort and use the systems that already exist. It's a management issue rather than lack of facilities or lack of access issue. So that to me is a lot more frustrating. Like if somebody's 5 foot tall, if somebody's a paraplegic, you don't really get upset as why they haven't put any effort to play sports or to be like like a basketball player. But if you see some guy who's just super fit, super healthy, he's like 6'6", can just jump out of it, you'd be like, why aren't you playing basketball? Why aren't you doing something with your physical ability? And that's kind of how I see some of these situations. I'm just disappointed in so many people in developed countries.
It's also like, I mean, who doesn't have the internet today? I mean, you can look up YouTube, you can look up tutorials. There's masterclass stuff now. Gordon Ramsay and Thomas Keller are both doing instructive videos. I mean, two of the best chefs in the world doing videos that you can learn from. I mean, the information's out there. I mean, they sell all their cookbooks. The instructions I find pretty clear, easy to read, even if you don't have a food background. I mean, it's out there. It's just you have to take the time and effort like anything else.
Many of these restaurants that we're going to be, some of these restaurants that we're going to be talking about, like I think it was, I don't want to say, one of the ones we talked about already has an actual online classes and things like that. You can sign on. And as you mentioned, if you like something at the restaurant, go even in the restaurant, check your phone for a recipe and see if you can remake it. But yeah, if you have nothing else to say about the
let's move on.
Let's go to the next one. Okay. So next one, we have the Berkshire pork chop, which is pomme puree, d'Anjou pear, watercress pistou, and yeah, that's it.
Sure. All right. So this is a Berkshire pork chop. You can tell here it was with the bone, but the way it was cut up into 3 pieces. So the bone was actually separated, and that's the piece at the top right corner of the screen. It's just a presentation thing. If you notice, the pork is slightly pink. I mean, pork you could do like medium well. I think the lowest I'd go with pork is probably medium. I don't know if you saw my recent Minetta Tavern post, but that pork chop I had was probably about medium. So it's a little pink, and there's actually a bloodline running through. I'm fine with that because pork is much better raised than chicken, but I wouldn't do pork medium rare or rare. That's just kind of disgusting. But pork medium well is good. So also here, pomme puree, of course, that's we'd call it mashed potatoes, but pomme, it's the potatoes pureed, usually butter, milk, salt. If you notice, you can tell by this pomme puree that the fat content is very high because it's super smooth and it's slightly shiny. Usually, a lot of the French places, what they do is they put about as much butter as the potatoes can actually hold. So it's like it's a super smooth texture, but it's like, yeah, it's not something you should eat every day. There's some jus here, pork jus. So there's also a charred onion here. I forgot to mention. I think it was a cipollini onion, just sort of like charred on its side. The German cooking, they do that too. There's something called Zwiebelrostbraten, which means onion roast beef. It's typically paired with meats, like a charred onion. It goes well. So there's some d'Anjou pear that's lightly cooked. I think it was just like slices sautéed, maybe a little salt and sugar. And then the pea stew. So that's the Provençal version of pesto. You can tell the name is kind of similar. So for those who don't know, Provence is the region at the bottom south of France. So if you look at their cooking, you see a lot of like in this case, I mean, it's similar to the Genovese pesto. So you have fresh garlic, basil, olive oil, but there's no pine nuts. I don't think there's any cheese in this one either, but you can see a lot of other similar items. Of course, they have more tomato sauces, more black olives. It's on the coast, so of course, seafood, things like that. Pretty nice dish. There's a few microgreens on top, not a whole lot to say about that. Any thoughts or comments?
Oh, this looks interesting. Now, again, this is one of the plating of the thing. Is this kind of thing where it's like you cut a slice of everything, put them together, or how is this? Yeah, the onion looks really interesting. It's an interesting plate.
Yeah.
Definitely with the pear, it has that kind of. It's not crunchy. I want to say pear is a kind of powdery. It's like a wet powdery type of thing with a pear. When it comes, it's definitely different from apples. And people eat. Most people who listen to this have probably eaten a pear. But yeah, there's something different about pears when it comes to those kind of. Are the fruits called mallards? I don't know what that kind of family or fruits is called. Those kind of things where it's different.
I always just said apple pear family, but I don't know the technical name. That's just like if people ask me what is quince, I say, oh, apple pear family, because then that's something they can associate it with. I don't know what the technical name though.
Because I'm trying to think of the different ways this would go. Because that kind of taste, then you have the onions, which is the charred, and it would have the different like layers and slices when you're eating it, so you have that different feel. And then of course the pork, and yeah, as you mentioned with the pork, for me, I prefer pork as the crispy. I mean, not it doesn't go all the way to bacon, but yeah, with pork for me, even for me, that seems like that's close to the line. I'm like, that's even playing kind of close there with the pork. For me, pork, that's something that I don't mind being the drier kind of sense, or yeah.
Yeah, because the one from Minetta Tavern, I didn't cut it open. I just took the outside, but that was more medium. But the thing with that is there's also a bloodline that goes through it. And the bloodline is fine, but the thing is a lot of people see that and freak out. It's the same thing with chicken. So some people will deliberately cook it well. That bloodline basically gets cooked out, so like you don't see it really. And again, it's one of those things that if you eat it, it's not going to poison you, but people just see that vein and they're like, this is undercooked. I won't eat it. So it's more of a psychological thing. But, if people want their chicken really well done or pork really well done, I mean, that's their prerogative.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it looks like a good dish. What is your estimation of this?
Sorry, what was the question?
Something that you definitely suggest that people try again? Like, would you try again or something? Or
Yeah, if it were on the menu again, yeah, I would definitely try. Yeah, like I say, I mean, I prefer beef, but like occasionally I'll get pork and other things just because, like Minetta Tavern, I had the pork chop the other day because I typically get steak, but it's like I'm not going to get steak every time I go there. It gets boring. Plus, they have other stuff, and it's like, I should give everything a shot the way I see it.
Yeah, okay. I don't really have too much else to say about this one. Unless if you're done, we can move on to the next one.
Yep, we can move on. Yep.
Okay, that was a rather short one, but we have ranted and raved about other things and other topics in other places. But yeah, okay. So the next one is wild boar agnolotti with market squash, ricotta, and huckleberry jam.
Yeah, so this was very interesting. You notice I don't get a lot of pasta either. I grew up eating a lot of pasta, so I kind of got tired of it. But I've come to appreciate pasta in part because of where I worked at Felidia, my last job, had really good pasta, and other places I've eaten out as well. And agnolotti, for those who don't know, that's the Piedmont version of ravioli. Thomas Keller is a big fan of this. This is how I first learned about it because it's similar to ravioli, but instead of stamping it out, you actually seal it by cutting it through. So the idea is, I mean, you could look it up. I can only say so much here, but basically you would have this like long like sheet of dough and you would pipe out little dots of filling, and then you would fold that over, then you would cut through with a cutter, and then that would seal it shut, and then that basically is what closed it. Then you would dust those in cornmeal or flour or something, then you would drop it in the water later to cook it. And it's nice because, like I say, the way you're cutting it seals it automatically, and it's just, you have this big line of pasta with all this filling, and you just cut through piece by piece. You could probably look it up on YouTube. I'm sure there's some video demoing how to make it. It's a little tedious, though, if you do it in a restaurant, because you have this really long sheet of dough, which you can't mess up, and then you have to roll the whole thing over. And if that sheet gets messed up, like, all your pasta pieces are messed up, so you got to do it again. But wild boar, and then market squash, that's patty pan squash. So some people have probably seen those. I've eaten those for years now. And then there's ricotta cheese inside. There's like it's like a pork jus type thing on the outside. I want to say, there was like an herb puree. I didn't mention it here. There wasn't a lot of it, just a little bit for flavor. And then huckleberry jam was in between the pieces of pasta. And it was interesting because I was asking about a wine pairing, and this was a story I think I touched on in a previous video, but the sommelier told me that apparently there's a certain vineyard in Germany where they produce this Pinot Noir, and boars would come and snack on the grapes, so they'd have to actually shoot the boars to stop them from eating the grapes. But because Pinot Noir pairs well with pork and like lighter red meats in general, it's kind of like poetic justice in a way to serve this with Pinot Noir, but it ended up being really good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now, can you explain what the jus is? Some of these terms might be unfamiliar to people, so I think whenever they come up for the first time in the conversation, it might be good just give a short little explanation for what they are.
Sure. So I'm not exactly sure how they made this, but what I sense they did was they braised the wild boar meat, and then some of the liquid they strained off and then reduced and made almost like make like a reduction out of that. You strain it, skim off any fat, and then you serve that on the plate with the pasta, because the idea is like you use that braising liquid because that braising liquid has a lot of flavor. You refine it a bit, but it's like you use it for flavor, and also it's a way to use up everything, not let it go to waste, because it's kind of a waste to, like, you braise the meat, you take the meat out, you throw the liquid away. It's like that's a waste when it's like you can make a nice sauce out of it, which is what they did here.
And this is one of the positive things, again, for starting to cook at your home, or if you already cook, this is one of the things that you can kind of, once you do the basic cooking, these are the kind of things that get you up to like intermediate level. Now starting to use a whole hog, as they say, where you do these different things, because some of this pork jus might have been droppings and things like that coming out of the process of making the berkshire pork chop, which was the previous meal. So in that process, they're like, okay, we're going to save that for this other dish that we have. And many well-run restaurants will find ways to coordinate their menu and things like that, where it's like most things kind of complement each other. Whereas the process for making many of these dishes, the initial kind of steps are the same for maybe half of the things. Then you kind of branch off the different positions. Or when you make a certain dish, there's certain things that, let's say, if the dish itself is the main thing, certain, I don't want to say symptoms or offshoots,
symptoms.
or certain things that occur while making certain things is the first process to make different parts of other meals. So that's kind of cool how some menus are, and I think more well-run kitchens will have that kind of process involved in it. And that's something you can add as yourself. There's many times when someone will make a meal and then they'll just, we're going to throw this away, we're going to pour this down the drain, when there's many ways you can actually upgrade. And one of the simple ones for me is, if you're getting something like chicken, if you're getting something like beef at home, get the actual cut yourself, and then you can actually trim off the fats. And if I'm doing a pan fry type of thing with these things, I'll normally use the fat from whichever meat that I'm actually having. If it's not a super lean cut, I'll normally do that as part of the cooking process of whatever I'm doing with it.
Yeah, especially in these bigger kitchens. Like when I worked at Bar Ballood, there was a guy who came in who did all the butcher work, and the trimmings of the bigger beef cuts would be put aside, and that's what we would use for family meals. So you cut them up, make stew. You could grind them up, do ground beef stuff. Trying to think of some other examples. Oh yeah, like Les Ballier, where I did my externship, they would get chickens and duck, and what you would do is after you broke down the duck, you would take the bones, you'd make stock out of them. Then we actually had blue-footed chicken, which was interesting. The feet were actually blue. You'd throw those in the stock because the feet have gelatin, so it cooks in the stock, and then when that stock cools down, it congeals and it gets like a thicker, there's more body to the stock, so that enhances flavor, texture too.
Yeah, it's just there's many things. It's an interesting field. It's something that again with the disappointment, because right now it's like to learn French cuisine, just to eat French cuisine, even I think in the 50s, you'd have to be in France. Now
Yeah.
you can find out the secrets of some of the greatest chefs ever, and you can just make that in your own kitchen, and you're just making your frozen patty, stale bread, fresh mustard burger, and thinking you're having some great food when you can have so much better. Well,
When I think of the burger thing, I just remember what Daniel wrote, and I like read it in his voice. You have a burger, and the bread is blah, the tomato is blah, lettuce blah. You put something. I just like I'm reading it in his voice.
oh man.
Man.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, if you have a family of four or something like that, each person can learn one kind of go-to meal, and then like once a week, it's just then once a week you have it's there's just so many things to do. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. Anything else to say on this? It's another good plating here, another interesting looking
Yeah.
plating.
No, it was another.
Like cheese for a second, but
Sorry, what were you asking?
I said it looked a bit like cheese for a second, but it's like no, it's
Yeah.
like not. It's not.
Well, it was another one of those dishes that sort of jumped out at me because, like I say, I mean, I do like steak frites and stuff, but it's like I don't want to get it every time I go to the place. And I thought, like, oh, wild boar, I haven't had that in a while. Like, oh, this is kind of an interesting preparation. Let's give this a shot, see how it is. And like I say, I mean, I've never been disappointed here, so I trust them to do a good job.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This one, I guess, even again with the wild boar, that's another thing that it's. If you live in the United States of America, you can get this probably delivered anywhere that you live. You can get some wild boar in your hands. So, and this is the kind of thing, if you like certain dishes where you've been having pork, this regular, like pork for it, regular pig, just one day be like, oh, let's save up and order some wild boar. And then you switch that in and just see what the difference is with something that you're already familiar with making. Just put the wild boar in there. There might be certain things when you do this that you might need to cook it for a little bit longer. You might need to marinate it for a little bit longer just to get the same kind of taste or things like that. But those are small adjustments to make to just start upgrading your culinary experience.
Yeah, that was like a chef in culinary school actually did wild turkey for Thanksgiving one year, and he actually shot it himself. But he explained that the wild turkey is different from the domestic turkey because the turkeys run around, so their legs are tougher. So what he did was instead of serving the legs whole roasted, he actually cut them off and made it into a force meat. He ground it up, mixed it with bacon and I think something else in there, and then he actually I think it was bacon and sausage and then the ground turkey. He made that into his stuffing and then put that inside, which I thought was interesting because you still have the whole turkey, but the legs are deconstructed because they're so tough. But he prepared them in a way that they were more palatable.
They're just wiry. That's the same thing I was talking about with the kienyeji chicken. There's a difference to these. Look at the ancestors of people versus you look at the. This is something we mentioned when we talked about the foie gras. People look like, oh, it's very bad that you have to you put these animals in cages and they don't move and you fatten them up and they just get massive, and people complain against that for valid reasons. But then you look at the obesity epidemic and health at every size. So when that happens to a human being, all of a sudden it's just healthy. But when it happens to an animal, we have to have PETA burning places down. I guess let me not put that. I don't know if they burnt places down, but PETA maybe breaking into places, barricading places, and having these huge outrages and things like that. But this is something that there's a difference. It's more wiry meat when you have the things out there. I think that's also some of the typical differences again between first world people and more developed country people. And you're seeing that divide already occur in places like here in Kenya. You look at the people in Kenya, in Nairobi, which is the capital city, there's a lot of the obesity epidemic is obesity spreading. Fat people are spreading, which is kind of spreading both in physical individual sense and also in a communal collective sense. The ability of that, because people are sitting in their homes now having more processed food, eating far more calories, and not being as anywhere close to as active. But the average person, the average poor person, might still have access to certain foods, certain more higher calorie foods. Corn syrup hasn't made its way out here, but they're still but they still eat some very natural foods. But still, regardless, they might have access to some of those. Their caloric intake might be increased, but on average, people walk kilometers to work and back and forth in day. They're just more active at home. They just do more physical things. So there is a difference in the actual physical sense of these people. Like if aliens came to Earth and or if there were vampires or werewolves, the werewolves were like, let's not eat in the United States of America. Let's go to Africa and eat those free-range humans instead. So that may be protection. Maybe Americans just on the slide protecting themselves from the alien invasion.
I don't know if I ever told you that joke we had at Neta about if we were trapped alone together, who would get eaten first, and I was at the top of the list because everybody was like, "You eat like foie gras, alcohol, all this," and they're like, we were making jokes because like a few of the guys were super skinny, so we're like, they wouldn't be too good. And I worked with this guy who had done a lot of drugs, and we're like, you'd probably start hallucinating from all the drugs he's done. And then it was funny because our friend Kirsten made some joke about like, would you taste like French food or like pierogies or what like that? Because she had some joke about like people tasting like their ethnicities. And this woman I was seeing at the time said, "I think you taste like happy hour." I'm like, I don't know what that's implying.
Steven is like a Wagyu human. They're like Wagyu long pork.
I am my foie gras, according to Rose.
With this one aside, there was a series, a zombie something series. I just picked it up on Audible. It's an interesting series. It was part of the Plus catalog. There was something that I'm surprised this hasn't been done more, and maybe it has. I just haven't been reading as many books. But they had like a zombie vampire because there was something in the storyline where there was the virus to turn people into zombies had been passed around using a certain vaccine that was spread around the world. And then that female vampire went and bit a human that already had that vaccine to turn them into a zombie, and then she became a zombie. So it was like a zombie vampire. And it was like, oh, that was kind of a cool idea because it's taking in the stuff. But she'd also been talking about how when she was killing people, she would get a mother and she would kill the kid in front of the mother. So the endorphins and things like that would pump in the mother's body, and then that would make her blood taste better. So these kind of things that are in there. Just, you are what you consume. You are what you feel, and things like that. And anyway, yeah.
All right.
Another thing, there could be something in that as well. It's just why like certain wild caught animals taste better because they've had a more happy to their evolution type of life with less worries. Whereas I think. And this is the thing, I still eat the meat. I still have certain objections to it. I still would rather prefer when I can have things that are more as close to the evolutionary environment. And we get to the point where we might be able to, like I said, with the replicators, get like equivalent to actual meat. Like I just saw this meme. It was like a news story was saying lab made meat doesn't have the same nutritional value as real live caught meat. And then the person commenting was like, thing that is not like one thing is not like one thing. News at it's like, yeah, of course, it's not the same. So we know we're close to that point as well. And we were talking about before with like different similarities with mushrooms and things like that. Yes, we're not at that point, but there will be a point where it's almost convincing enough to the same. It might even be exactly with the replicators. But yeah, we are what we can see when things like that. Just considerations to have, and that's my rant.
Sure. All right. That's all.
Moving on to the next one. So the next one here we have is let me make sure, this is the right one. With the magret, the canard, l'orange, and which is a rohan duck breast, orange and ginger glaze, black radish, and quinoa.
Sure. So I'd mentioned in a previous conversation that magret is the duck breast that comes from the foie gras duck, so the fat content's a bit higher. Okay. Typically, that's the moulard duck. That's the cross between the Muscovy and the Peking duck. It's crossbred because I guess the fat content is better. Typically, duck you have about medium rare or so. You can do medium or well, but it gets kind of this metallic flavor. Plus, it gets tougher. So I typically do mine like medium rare or so. So quinoa, I think you can tell the grain, I think it's the germ that comes out of it when it's done. There's some orange zest here. Now, this is based off duck à l'orange, which is a Normandy dish. Normandy, of course, that's where D-Day took place. Very classical dish. I don't remember all the ingredients off the top of my head, but it's typically like orange juice, sugar. There's some of the duck jus. I'm trying to think if there's brandy or some other liqueur in that, but it's a very old school French dish. This is kind of a take on it. They added ginger to it, for example. I've made duck à l'orange in the past, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But it's a very classical dish, and like I say, it's from Normandy, where D-Day happened. So it's a dish that's been around for a long time. And then on top here, there's some, this is the black radish, just lightly seared, and then just some orange zest because it goes with the flavor and some microgreens. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. It's an interesting plating. Looks like there's on the breast there to the right, looks like there's some granulation on it. Is that some salt? Or is
there's a little bit of salt to finish. What some places will do too is they'll actually brush a little bit of oil along the top to prevent the meat from drying out, because once you're supposed to let meat rest so the juices redistribute it, but once that you cut it, the meat will also start to dry. Sometimes they'll brush a little bit of oil on the top and then just some salt, because the salt enhances the flavor. Now it's already seasoned in advance when you cook it, but there's a little bit more on top just to enhance it. I know Danielle has talked about in some dishes he'll actually salt before, while, and even after cooking, like something like a Côte de Boeuf, like a big steak. They'll let it sit in salt the day before, sear it, and then while it's cooking, put a little salt on it, then cut it. Then at the end, put some more salt to finish. And it sounds like a lot at first, but because it's such a thick cut of meat and there's a lot of fat content, it takes a while to penetrate. It really enhances the flavor. It's very nice.
Yeah, speaking of the thickness, you can see even here with that really thick skin of the duck is present there on the chicken breast. It looks like quinoa is something that's. Go ahead.
There's a little bit of white fat on the duck skin. Ideally, you're supposed to render out the white fat completely. I'm not going to beat them up too badly. It was still a nice dish, but the ideal is that you score it and then you render out the white enough so it's just a thin brown crispy layer. It's hard to get exactly right though, especially in a busy service. But I mean, it was a nice dish. I don't mean to knock them, but it's like that's the ideal.
Could there be some dishes where you're supposed to keep the fat, or you think this is just more of a bit of an unforced error in their part, or just
a bit of an unforced error? It's sort of like if you have steak that's like rare or medium rare, but the cooking's like uneven on the inside. It's not. I mean, it's not like I'm not going to send it back or make a big deal, but it's not like ideal. Like if I were to go to Per Se or like Danielle or something and the meat were to be overdone, like then I would say something, because if you're spending that amount of money. But this is, I'm not going to be too harsh, because again, I've worked in a kitchen and I know, like, especially in a busy service, it's hard to get this stuff exact. So I'm pretty forgiving of this stuff. If they sent this out to me like way overcooked or something, then I would say something, but that's just not ideal. It's not bad. It's just not ideal. I'd put it that way.
That is making it inedible. I think that to me, that's probably something that for you is the first time. I'm very apprehensive. I don't know if I can't really think of too many times. If it's even happened where I've sent something back, I don't know. I guess it's in your prerogative and depends on how you can do it. You can do it very rudely, or you can be very specific on things. But I think if something is edible, I'll probably give it a try at least. Yeah. But of course, if something is wrong, the completely wrong meal, I'll send that back. That I think has happened, but that hardly ever happens in most places. But yeah, I am.
Well, it's also I was going to say it's the margin. Sorry, one thing on that. I was going to say it's also the margin of error. Like, I had a friend who went to a steakhouse and she got her steak medium, but I guess she said it came out well and it was cold. So it's like, that's really bad. It's already overcooked, and that means it sat for a while. So like stuff like that, I would say something. But if it's like slightly off, I'm not going to make a big deal. Yeah.
Speaking of that, there was some cooking show I saw where I don't know why this person was doing this, but she was making. We've talked about this previously in a different conversation, but she was making she was having some friends over, and then she made some potatoes and some steaks, but she asked them how she wants them cooked, and the whole time she knows her culinary ability. And then they say different things. One is like medium rare, one is rare, one is well done. She goes back in the kitchen and just makes them all well done and brings them back on. Like, why did you even ask? And then most of the people who ask for different things will just like, oh, this is good, this is pretty good. And then one of the persons is like, no, this is not what I ordered. Like, why did you even ask? And yeah, so there's different ways of doing this. I don't think you just accept. You can say like, oh, maybe you write something after and you say like, okay, maybe like it was okay, but this you mentioned, but I think it's good to give feedback. Don't just feel you're also a customer. You're also getting a service in a general sense. If you're going somewhere for free, maybe it's different. But if you're actually paying, I think, and if I'm not wrong, most people who would be working wouldn't mind like actual input. Yes, they might have stress, they might have issues in the back there, but it's a social issue. I don't think it's necessarily negative to give back input.
And I was going to say, this duck is very well cooked in terms of temperature, because if you notice the color is even all the way through, that's actually good. Like some places, there's something, I can send you a picture of a windowed steak, but there's the windowing effect where if you look at the edges of the steak, the edges look more done, and then the inside is more medium or medium rare. That's not good. Ideally, it's supposed to be a hard sear on the outside so it's brown, but then in the middle it's even all the way through. That's the ideal. With sous vide cooking, it's a little bit easier because you can cook it mostly in advance and sort of hit it last minute and make sure it's hot. But like in terms of the internal temperature, it's really nice. Like I say, the skin could be rendered out a little better, but I mean, I don't mean to nitpick them too much. So
that's one of the things I'm looking forward to getting into once I have the access to the sous vide. Once That's probably
Yeah.
something definitely once you have a home and are more settled down, I think that's something I'd look into. And yeah, I was just mentioning like the quinoa is rather popular in the,
Yeah.
it's rather fashionable right now. It's trendy in the health kind of areas. Like, oh, switch to this quinoa, this quinoa, this quinoa, that. So this looks like an interesting dish. And one more thing, there's like Chinese orange chicken. So there's certain things, orange duck. I mean, there's certain things where it's like different cultures and different communities find different pairings to just seem
Yeah.
that seem to be a regular type of things that are out there, which is interesting.
Yeah, I'd have to look back to when this started now because I mean oranges aren't native to France. I mean originally China, then through colonization. So I'd have to look back exactly when this dish started. But I know it's considered like a Normandy staple item.
Okay. Yeah, and again, with Normandy staple, that's on the coast, so that could be part of why they could have been coming in by boat
Yeah.
from there, from China. And there could be some Chinese people who came over on the ships, or somebody who was on the coast, some sailors, and like, oh, we had this dish in China, and then they made their own attempt at it in France, and then it develops that kind of way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So next one.
Sure.
Okay. So here we go with steak frites. It's a petit tender, bordelaise sauce, romaine heart with buttermilk dressing, and pommes frites.
Sure. So you can see here the portion's a little small, but this was a restaurant week item, so it's like, I think I spent like $40 for 3 courses or something, so you can't really complain. Um, Petit tender, so it's a tenderloin that's a part of the filet mignon. It's like not the very end of it where it's super small, but it's not the Chateaubriand, which is super thick. It's somewhere in between. Nicely cooked. You can see here nice sear. It's cooked evenly through. The romaine heart's just cut down the middle. There's a buttermilk vinaigrette and some chives, a little bit of salt, pommes frites, fries. And so this was funny. So bordelaise is it's based off of Espanol sauce. Espanol sauce is one of the original mother sauces. So you make brown roux. That's the fat and floury. You make it toasty in the pan so it starts to turn brown. It gets this very nice roasted smell. You finish it with stock. And then what a lot of places will do is they'll finish it with stock. You simmer it with herbs and other things, strain it off, but then they reduce it by half. That's what a demi-glace is. Demi-glace means half ice, and the reason it's called half ice is because when it congeals, the gelatin and everything concentrates, so it gets more solid. So it's not as solid as ice, but it's more in that direction, hence the name half ice. Now, bordelaise is a demi-glace, but it's with the addition of bone marrow. So it's funny. I posted this. One of my old friends. He and I work together at Patello in Jersey City. He's a manager there now. He goes. At first, I thought you wrote boudoir sauce when he saw my post. I thought that was a funny remark. but I like bordelaise. I mean, it's that with the bone marrow, so it's a little fattier and the flavor from that. It's nice. I mean, like I say, the portion wasn't huge, but I mean, I got 2 other things in this restaurant week, so it's like I can't complain. I mean, the quality is definitely solid, but price wise, I think this was worth what I paid for it. Yep.
Huh. Yeah, this is another typical one that you'll find at most French places. French fries are something that's spread around Europe and Western Europe. In Italy, also, this was a patatina fritta, was what they used to call it there, was a common thing you'd find as well. It was normally a side dish. Very few. Yeah, I can't think of really too many Italian dishes where it was going together. They didn't have the fish and chips type of thing, whatnot.
Yeah.
It's nothing like that there. But most restaurants would have it on as a side dish, or you'd at least be able to find like grilled potatoes and things like that as one of the sides. That was a common thing that. Yeah, but yeah, pommes frites. I mean, it's steak and chips, steak and fries. It's a common thing in many cuisines. But then you said they'll put the different kind of twist on with the bordelaise sauce and different kind of French twist romaine heart. No. Anything else you would say about this?
Not much more to say about that.
Okay. So we got one more. I think the way it's looking, we'll finish off with this one, and then we'll do like an entire dessert show, which will might be short.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So here we go. This is a different steak frites. Steak frites, which is a hanger steak, salad, roasted cipolinis, and frites not pictured. And this was another restaurant week item. Did you get it together with the other steak frites, or is this a different day?
No. I didn't do the Ron Swanson turf and turf here. This was another time. So it was funny too because I'm looking at this photo. I think I actually had a beer with this because I'm looking at the part of that glass at the top of that photo. I think I had beer with this instead of wine. I do that sometimes. So I like hanger steak. I don't know if you're familiar with the cut. Maybe we could put up a graphic on the board, but it's kind of like if you picture the cow like standing on its 4 legs. It's not like the front part above the legs, but it's like slightly below that. Like I guess it's like its upper middle chest. This used to actually be called butcher's cut because apparently butchers would like it so much they'd keep it for themselves and not sell it. I like this cut because I think it's that. Well, I think it's that right degree of like. It's not tough. Like there's a little bit of a chew, but it's not unpleasant if you get what I'm saying. But there's still like a good flavor to it. This was similar. There's the arugula salad. There's some blood orange supremes. That's like the slices. Roasted cipollini goes well with that. There's a slight jus on the bottom, and again pumped frites. But they're on the side. It's not really important.
Yeah.
Thoughts or comments or anything?
So you said what was that on the left there? That's it's just part of the fat.
That's roasted cipollini onions.
Okay, so cipollini onions. Okay. Yeah. Oh yeah, so small little onions, right?
Yep. Yeah, they're bigger than pearl onions, but they're not as big as like white onions that you'd cut up. They're kind of nice because there's a good sugar content, so you can just roast them in the oven. A place I used to work, we'd roast them and cook them in like a braising liquid with butter and stock and stuff. It's really nice. It's like I say, they're that right degree because they're small enough so if you roast them whole, they'll cook all the way through, but they'll still caramelize and you'll get that flavor. It goes nice with beef and other things. Yeah.
That's the thing. Like people have this grill, and then all they do on the grill is just grill meat. Like there's so many other things you can grill: meat, grill fruits. You can grill like gourds and things like that, like pumpkins. You can grill veggies. Like it's so easy to get skewers. It's come on, people, just step up your game just a little bit. You could just have this culinary. It's just a few steps away. Just a little bit of effort away.
You ever have grilled watermelon? It's really nice.
I don't think I've tried it yet, but yeah, I can imagine it would be.
I highly recommend that because the sugar content is nice. It actually gets like a caramelized crust on the outside. I did it on a George Foreman grill at home, but if you do it on a charcoal grill, you get kind of like the charcoal, which is a contrast, so it's a different flavor. But I think I've seen grilled watermelon paired with like certain fish or something. It's really nice in my opinion because it's that right degree of the sugar content, but there's also some water, so it won't dry out, but it'll hold its shape, and the sugars will caramelize. It's very nice. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that's it. I guess for the food part, we need to finish it off. If you have anything,
sure.
What do you think with this restaurant? I mean, we've been checking on the website, and has there been news on whether it's going to open, when it's going to open? What's keeping it from opening yet?
See, I don't know what the details are on that because the thing is, I know that places are starting to open. For example, the Modern, that's another place I've eaten a lot. That's by MoMA. They posted on their Instagram page that they're going to open next week. And there's actually, if you walk by, the menu says coming soon. There's that cheese place I like, Casa Lua by me. I noticed they've started to open. They're actually like building their patio outside. So they're clearly gearing up to open. So I don't know what the deal with DB is. I think they would open soon because as far as I know, he was planning to reopen, but I look online, I don't see anything. I walked by, it's closed. They said we'll reopen soon, but they didn't say when. So hopefully soon. I mean, I would think with everyone else reopening, they probably would too, but I haven't heard anything as of yet. I'm looking forward to it. That's my life at the moment. Looking forward to restaurants reopening.
Yeah, I think right now there's a notification on the website, but that's pretty much it. But yeah, I don't know. So
because Danielle's been open, Bar Balut has been open this whole time. Cafe Balut is open, so. I think they were waiting for 100% capacity, but I mean, I would think by now with, all these other places, like I was saying to someone the other day, a lot of these places don't require masks now. Like I walk in without a mask, they don't say anything. Staff don't have masks. Nobody asks if people are vaccinated. So I would think at this point they'd be more amenable to opening, but I don't know what if he has a certain plan or maybe there might be issues with staffing or something. I'm not sure. That could be it. Because that's what I wondered about that with my job, Felidia, because basically everybody moved on because the place closed. But I wondered, are some of these places going through that issue as well, where people have moved on and it's like, well, we got to rebuild a whole new team now because people are like, I can't put my life on hold waiting for this place to open. So I'm wondering, could that be an issue as well? I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but that would seem plausible to me.
That's what I was thinking. First of all, why are you snitching on these places? Because de Blasio is still in. They don't have to be married yet. They're going to come in and shut these non-masker places up. But with this, yeah, that's what I was thinking. There might be different places where I guess if this is a family of restaurants kind of owned on the same ownership, maybe some people are being moved around, and he's just done the cost benefit analysis, like running this kitchen. Maybe it's just the rent on this kitchen, or I guess maybe this one has the lowest rent, and there's other places have higher rent, and he has to pay that rent anyway, so he might as well be earning from those places. There could be many considerations.
Well, I was gonna say I don't know about that because I mean this is Midtown, so this is near the Sofitel Hotel in Algonquin. I mean, Danielle is in a very classy area. He actually lives above Restaurant Danielle. That's on the east side.
Yeah.
And then Cafe Balut is
Something
somewhere around there. What's that?
Maybe some places he owns the building or owns the actual restaurant. Some places he's renting. Like there's many considerations, I think. And as you mentioned, there's certain places that have opened. So he might have certain people at certain positions that are being poached by other restaurants who are like, okay, our person, we lost our sous chef. And then this person was like below sous chef level and was still waiting in line to be sous chef at one of the Balud's restaurants. But then now some other place opened and he decided to go there instead of waiting at Balud's for like 2 more years before he gets the promotion. How many restaurants does he have in New York area?
So off the top of my head, there's Danielle, that's a flagship. There's Cafe Balut, that's his like number 2. That has like 1 Michelin star. DB Bistro 3. Bar Balut, where I used to work. I think that's it for New York. He had DBGB. That was like a very casual place, but that closed. That was I think that was like lower city, but I think that's it for New York as far as I know. I mean, he has the charcuterie stuff. That's actually he has a facility in Long Island City where they actually produce charcuterie for the whole company. So it used to be produced at a Bar Balut, but apparently they were producing so much charcuterie and each of these restaurants serves it. So they need a specific facility where all they make is charcuterie. Well, I follow one of the guys. His name is, I could send you a link to his page. He posts some really interesting stuff though, like pate en croûte with like, you know, it's in a crust and he has like elaborate like work out of the dough. Like he has like flowers on top. It's really cool stuff. It's like I would have to work so hard and take so long to learn how to make something like half as good as that, you know?
Yeah. All right. So I think that's it. If there's nothing else, we're trying to keep these to about an hour and a half. And whichever you're going to watch this, wherever you listen to this, thank you very much for listening. There will be timestamps. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to click and go to it. If you're watching them on other platforms, other locations, or if you're seeing this from the website, there's going to be different timestamps where you can jump around and see the actual different things. And we will be back because there's desserts. Like the first one was mostly appetizer and then a bit of entree. This one was all entree. And then now we're going to have a desserts one. And looking forward to that one. There's a lot of really delectable things that have been pictured here. Might not be as much conversation in that, but we already have other. Stephen hasn't stopped eating. And there's also other pictures he's had from before. Some of the places he's gone to, like he went back to DB Bistro, which was the first one that we talked about. Was it DB Bistro?
No, Minetta Tavern. Minetta Tavern. We're doing
Tavern. Sorry, getting that wrong. DB Bistro is what we're talking about now. So, yeah, we've been back to Minetta Tavern. So maybe depending on it, how it goes, we might toss a few of those in there. But we'll see. The next time we'll record, we'll see how that goes and probably update the Minetta Tavern with that one as well and just keep these going. As mentioned before, if there's any restaurants in New York City area that you suggest Stephen should check out, let us know. He might put those on a list and check them out. If there's certain questions that you have for me, I haven't done Pizza Week stuff yet. We got 2 more days. I'm normally fast on the weekend. I think I'm going to switch from having my 2-day weekend fast to doing like fasting every 3rd day. So it's like I eat for 3 days and fast because I want to get into more working out. And when I do the weekend fast, by the time I get to Sunday and get to my Monday workout, it's like my energy is rather low. So I want to get to a situation where I have, if I do one day every 3 days, and I still can keep up energy to get good workouts in. But I might try out the Pizza Week. I have filmed some of the things, the mushrooms, so I'm going to try to put in at least more. Once a week, I'll start doing some kind of cooking and maybe post some how-to or some cooking videos and things like that. Anything else you want to say about this, Stephen?
Nope, that's all. Hope you enjoyed it.
Okay, so till next time, thank you very much. This has been Dishing Dish with Stephen Kirshner. Still working on that name. It might be Dish to Dish, Dishing Dish, Dish Dishing. We'll figure that out. Let us know what you think about this series. Let us know about the food. Thank you very much again, Stephen, for letting us know about these foods. Thank you, DB Bistro, for making this food to begin with, and best of the luck in opening up. And that's it for me.
Yep. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. DB Bistro. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.